They called it the choosing, but everyone in Iron Hollow knew what it really was. An auction. The Alpha King needed a Luna, and the packs of the Seven Valleys had sent their daughters up the mountain like tribute, each one wrapped in silver and centoil, each one praying to the moon that she would be the throat he did not bite. I stood at the very end of the line, and I had made myself ugly on purpose. It is not a hard thing to do if you know the old ways. My grandmother taught me before she died how to gray the skin at the eyes, how to dull the shine of hair until it looked like wet ash, how to bend the spine a little and let the mouth hang soft and slack so that the whole face forgot how to be looked at. A dimming, she called it. Not a lie exactly. More like closing the shutters over a lamp that is still burning behind them. I closed my shutters that morning in the cold stone room where they had penned the 40 of us, and when I looked into the water bucket, a stranger looked back. Thin, sallow, forgettable, a girl no king would ever choose. That was the whole point. "Moon have mercy," said the girl beside me, and she was not talking to the moon. She was looking at me, at the drab brown shift they'd given the low-born ones, at my bare feet on the freezing floor. "What valley spat you out?" "No valley," I said, which was true. "I came alone." She laughed, and the sound was cruel and bright and young. "Then you came to die alone. He doesn't choose strays." She smoothed the front of her own gown, real silk, dyed the deep red of the bloodline pack, the color of a family that had money and lands and a name that opened doors. "He'll pick a Luna worthy of the crown, someone with blood behind her." "I'm sure he will," I said, and I meant it more than she knew. I had blood behind me, more blood than every daughter in that line put together. That was exactly what I was running from. They marched us up through the keep at dusk. Iron Hollow is not a soft place. It is a fortress carved into the throat of a mountain, all black stone and old iron, torches guttering in brackets shaped like reaching hands, the wind moaning down the long halls like something grieving. My people would have found it beautiful. My people are gone. The auction hall was the largest room I had ever stood in, a cavern of a place with a floor of polished slate and a ceiling lost in smoke and shadow. Along both walls the highborn of the kingdom sat in tiers, hundreds of them, wolves in human skins wearing furs and jewels and expressions of lazy appetite. The air was thick with scent, the musk of 1,000 predators pretending to be civilized, and under it, sharp and cold, the mineral tang of the mountain itself. And at the far end, on a dais of black stone with no cushion and no ornament, sat the Alpha King. I had never seen him before. I had heard of him the way everyone hears of kings, a shape made of rumor. Kalen of Iron Hollow, they called him, the wolf who took the 7 valleys in a single winter, and then, to the surprise of every enemy still breathing, did not burn them. A king who ruled with a closed fist but had, so far, refused to fill the empty place beside his throne. 3 years, the whispers said. 3 years he had sent the mating auctions away empty. 3 years he had chosen no one. He was younger than I expected and harder. He sat the way a blade sits in its sheath, perfectly still and full of the promise of motion. Dark hair, dark brows, a face that had been handsome before something taught it not to bother. His eyes, even from across that great room, were the pale gold of a wolf's, and they moved down the line of us with the patience of a man reading a page he already knows he will not enjoy. The choosing began. One by one, the highborn daughters were led before the dais. A crier called each name and lineage in a voice that bounced off the stone. Seraphine of Bloodline, daughter of the warden of the Red Valley. The girl who had mocked me walked out with her chin high and her red silk pooling like a wound, and she was beautiful, truly beautiful, and she knew it. She sank into a bow that showed the line of her neck. The king looked at her for the space of one breath. "No," he said. "Just that, no." Seraphine's face did not move, but I saw her hands close into fists at her sides as they led her away. Behind me, someone in the tiers laughed softly. It went on like that. Name after name, valley after valley, silk after silk. Daughters of wardens, daughters of generals, a girl said to be the fastest runner in the northern packs, a girl with a voice that could bend a room, each of them beautiful, each of them wanting it or wanting to survive it, which in that hall looked very much the same. And to each of them the king said no, in that same flat voice, until the word stopped sounding like a rejection and started sounding like a wall he was building higher, one stone at a time, between himself and the whole grasping world. I understood him then a little. I had built walls too. By the time they came to the end of the line, to the strays and the low-born and the girl with the ashen face and the bare feet, the whole hall had gone restless and bored. The king's jaw was tight. This was the third year. He would say no 40 times and send us down the mountain, and the packs would grumble, and next spring they would do it all again, because that is what packs do. The crier reached me. He glanced at his list, frowned, glanced at me. No lineage recorded, he said, half to himself. Then louder, with a sneer he did not bother to hide, the stray called herself Wren, no valley, no blood. I stepped forward. I had planned for this. I had planned to shuffle out, keep my chin down, be forgettable, be the last no of 40, and then walk back down the mountain a free woman with my life and my secret both intact. I had come to the auction for one reason only, not to be chosen, but to see him. To stand in the same room as the wolf who now sat the throne my father should have sat, and to decide with my own eyes whether the stories about him were true, whether he was the kind of king I could let live. That was the errand. Look, judge, leave. I did not come to be seen. So I do not know, to this day, exactly what went wrong. I only know that as I crossed that slate floor with my shutters closed and my spine bent and my face made of ash, the king leaned forward on his black stone throne. And he inhaled. I felt it before I understood it. A pull, low in the chest, like a hook set behind the breastbone and drawn gently but without mercy toward the dais. My wolf, who had been sleeping under the glamour, under all my careful dimming, lifted her head inside me and made a sound I had never heard her make. The king stood. The hall went silent. Kings do not stand for the choosing. The whole ritual is built so that they need not move. The daughters come to him, and he judges from his seat, and his stillness is the point. But Kalen of Ironhollow came down off his dais, one slow step at a time, his pale gold eyes fixed on the ashen stray in the brown shift, and the court held its breath. He stopped an arm's length from me. This close, he was very tall, and the scent of him rolled over me, pine and iron and cold snow and something underneath that was warm, that was banked coals, that made my closed shutters rattle in their frame. I kept my head down. I kept my face slack. I begged my wolf to be still. "Look at me," he said. His voice was quieter than it had been. Everyone in the hall heard it anyway. I did not want to. If I looked at him, the shutters would open. The glamour holds best when the face is doing nothing, when the eyes are dull and downcast. To meet a wolf's gaze is to let your own wolf rise to the surface, and mine was already straining. I said, he repeated very softly, "Look at me." I looked at him. I do not know what he saw. The glamour held, I know it held, because I felt it holding, felt the gray still lying over my skin like frost. To his eyes I must still have been plain, sallow, forgettable. And yet something passed between us in that look, something that had nothing to do with the shutters at all, something older than glamour and deeper than blood, and I watched the king of Ironhollow's careful, walled-up face crack straight down the middle. "Her," he said. He did not look away from me. "This one." The crier fumbled his list. "Majesty, she has no lineage, no valley, she's a stray, she." "This one," the king said again, and now his voice had teeth in it, "or none, as it has been for 3 years. Choose which answer you want and stop asking me for the other." The silence broke into an uproar. I heard Seraphine's voice somewhere in it, sharp and disbelieving. I heard the highborn shouting that it was an insult, that the throne could not take a stray-born Luna, that there must be some trick, some spell. They were right about that last part. But no one, in all that noise, thought to ask the one question that would have unraveled everything. Not what is her lineage, but why does a girl with no lineage smell, underneath the dust, like the oldest blood in the world? I asked myself that question. I asked it all the way up the black stairs to the tower they gave me, with the king's men at my back and the whole kingdom's fury ringing in my ears. I had come to look at a king and leave. Instead, the king had looked back, and now I could not leave at all. They gave me rooms high in the keep, Aluna's rooms, cold and vast and hung with old banners the color of dried blood. A pair of she-wolf attendants dressed me and did not speak to me and looked at me the way you look at a mistake you have been ordered not to correct. When they left, I bolted the door, sat down on the wide stone sill of the window, and let the glamour go, just for a moment, just to breathe. In the black glass of the night window, my true face looked back at me. I will not pretend it is a modest thing to describe your own face, so I will only tell you what the old stories say, because they said it about my mother and her mother before her, all the way back. They say the daughters of the moonborn line carry the light. Not beauty, exactly. Beauty is a small word and the wrong one. Presence. The kind of face that a room turns toward the way plants turn toward a window. My mother could silence a war council by walking into it. My grandmother, they say, once stopped a duel with a look. I had spent my whole life hiding that face, because the last time the world saw it fully, my whole family died for it. We were the silver pack once. The oldest line, the first wolves, the ones the moon was said to have touched with her own hand. Kings came from us for 1,000 years. And then, when I was small, a coalition of the lesser packs, jealous, frightened, hungry, fell on us in a single night, and burned the silver hold to its roots, and put every moonborn they could find to the sword. My mother hid me in the root cellar under a barrel of winter apples, and told me to close my shutters and never, ever open them, no matter what I heard. I heard everything. I kept my shutters closed. I was the last. I had been the last for 15 years. And the man who had led that coalition, the wolf who had struck the first blow and taken the first hold and worn my father's crown while it was still warm, that wolf's name was Kalin of Ironhollow. No, I am telling it wrong. Let me tell it true, the way I only learned it true much later, because the lie I believed that first night is the whole engine of what came after. The name I had been given, the name my grandmother spat when she taught me to hide, the name of the wolf who burned my people was Kalin of Ironhollow. That much I knew and had known since I was old enough to hate. What I did not know, that first night in the tower, was that there were two of them. I decided I would kill him. I want to be honest about that because the story is worthless if I am not. I did not come to Ironhollow only to look. That is what I told myself, and it was half true, but the other half was a knife I had carried up the mountain sewn into the hem of my drab-brown shift, a thin blade of silvered steel that my grandmother had pressed into my hands with her dying breath and a single instruction. When you are certain, and only when you are certain, you end the line that ended ours. I was certain. I had been certain for 15 years. The auction was only ever meant to get me close enough to be certain of my aim. And now the moon, with the terrible sense of humor she is famous for, had put me in the king's own keep, in the Luna's own rooms, with a claim on the king's own bed. I could not have arranged a better position if I had spent a lifetime plotting it. All I had to do was wait for the mating night, when he would come to me alone and unguarded and expecting a bride, and I would open my shutters and let him see exactly whose daughter he had chosen. And while his face was still learning what that meant, I would put my grandmother's silver into his heart. That was the plan. I lay awake all night polishing it, the way you polish a stone until you cannot feel its edges anymore, and by dawn I had made it perfectly smooth, and I hated him with a clean and total hatred that had kept me alive for 15 years, and I was ready. He did not come to me alone that night, or the next, or the one after. Instead, on the fourth morning, a servant brought a message. The king requested that the Luna-elect walk with him in the high garden, requested, not commanded. The high garden was a strange thing to find in a fortress like Ironhollow, a walled terrace near the summit where someone, long ago, had hauled up soil and coaxed a garden to grow in the thin cold air. Frost-hardy things mostly. Silver sage and moonflower and a single ancient pine bent double by the wind. The king was already there when I arrived, standing at the parapet with his back to me, looking out over the 7 valleys spread below like a map of everything he owned. I could have done it then. His back was to me. The knife was in my sleeve. There were no guards on the terrace. I have thought about that morning a great many times since, and I still do not fully understand why I did not draw the blade. I told myself it was because it was too soon, because I had not made him see me first, and that mattered. I needed him to know at the end whose hand it was. That was true, but it was not the whole truth. The whole truth is that when he turned and looked at me, plain and ashen as I still was, something in his face was so tired and so unguarded that my hand forgot, for one breath, that it had ever held a knife at all. "You didn't sleep," he said. "Neither did you," I said before I could stop myself. It was true. I could smell it on him, the sleeplessness, the way you can smell rain coming. Something moved at the corner of his mouth, not a smile, the place where a smile would go on a man who had forgotten how. "No," he agreed. "I don't much." He turned back to the valleys. "Do you know why I chose you?" "Because you are cursed," I thought. "Because the moon is laughing at both of us." "No, Majesty." "Neither do I," he said it plainly, the way he said everything. 3 years they've brought me the most beautiful women in 7 valleys. Warriors, singers, daughters of my strongest allies. Every one of them wanted the crown, and I could smell it on them like smoke, the wanting. It filled up the whole hall. He glanced at me. "You walked in wanting nothing. You walked in like a woman on her way somewhere else who'd been stopped by mistake. And my wolf," he stopped. His jaw worked. "My wolf has never once in 3 years lifted his head for any of them. He lifted it for you. A stray-born girl in a borrowed shift, with dust on her face, who couldn't even be bothered to look at me. I don't understand it. I don't like not understanding things. But I have learned to trust that one instinct above every other, because it is the only part of me that has never been wrong." I said nothing. My clever, smooth, polished plan was sitting in my chest like a stone. "They're saying you tricked me," he went on. "A love spell, old blood magic. My council wants you put to the question." He said this without any particular weight, as though remarking on the weather. Then he turned and looked at me full on, those pale gold eyes steady on my ashen, dimmed, lying face. "Did you," he asked, "trick me?" And here is the thing I have never been able to explain, not to him, not to myself. I had a knife in my sleeve and a dead family at my back and 15 years of hatred polished smooth as a river stone. He had handed me the perfect lie. "Yes, forgive me. It was a spell. I'll go. Let me go." And I could have walked back down the mountain that very morning with my secret hole and my errand merely delayed. Instead I said, "Yes." He went very still. "Not the way they mean," I said. My voice did not sound like my own. "There's no love spell on you, but I am not what I look like. I've been hiding since I was a child. There's a glamour on my face, an old one. What you chose at the auction wasn't a stray. It was a shut door with a stranger painted on it." I do not know why I told him. I have decided over the years that it was because he asked, "Did you trick me?" and looked me in the eye while he asked it, like a man who had been lied to his whole life and had simply, quietly, stopped being able to bear one more. I could have borne to kill him. I found to my complete horror that I could not bear to lie to him. "Show me," he said. "If I show you," I said, "you won't be able to unsee it, and you may wish you'd never come down off that throne." "Show me," he said again, not a command, a man asking to be let in. So I opened my shutters. I did it slowly. There in the thin gold light of the high garden, with the 7 valleys below us and the bent pines sighing in the wind, I let the gray lift from my skin. I let the dullness leave my hair. I let my spine come straight and my eyes come up, and I let my true face, my mother's face, my grandmother's face, the face the moon was said to have touched, rise up out of the ash like the sun coming up over the shoulder of the mountain. The King of Iron Hello looked at me. I watched it hit him. I watched the recognition move across his face in stages, the way light moves across a valley at dawn, first confusion, then wonder, then something that was almost fear, and then, terribly, a grief so old and so total that I felt it land on my own chest like a blow. "Moon and stars," he whispered. You have the light, the old light. I've only ever seen it in." He stopped. His hand came up halfway toward my face and stopped in the air between us. "There's only one line that ever carried that, and they're all—" He could not finish it. "Dead," I said. "Yes, all but one." I held his gaze, and I let all 15 years of it into my voice. "I am Irale, daughter of Corvin, last of the Silver Pack, the Moonborn. The line your coalition burned to the root when I was 6 years old, and my mother hid me under a barrel of apples and told me to keep my shutters closed while I listened to my whole family die. My hand was already in my sleeve. The silver was already in my palm. I came up this mountain to look at the wolf who wore my father's crown and decide if he deserved to keep breathing. I've decided." And I drew the knife. He did not move. That is what stopped me in the end. Not mercy, not doubt, not the light in the garden. He did not move. A wolf as fast as Kalen of Ironhollow could have disarmed me before the blade cleared my sleeve. He did not so much as flinch. He stood there with his hand still half raised and his old grief still raw on his face, and he looked at the silver point a handspan from his heart, and then he looked back up at me, and he said the words that broke my whole life open like an egg. "It wasn't me." "Don't," I said. The knife was shaking. "Don't you dare." Kalen of Ironhollow led the coalition. Kalen of Ironhollow struck the first blow. Kalen of Ironhollow wears my father's crown. Everyone knows it. I've known it for 15 years. "Kalen of Ironhollow," he said very quietly, "was my father." The knife did not fall, but something in my arm went weak. "He led the coalition," the king said. "He struck the first blow. He burned the silver hold and wore your father's crown, and he did it when I was 9 years old, and I have spent every day of my reign trying to wash the smell of it off this throne." His pale gold eyes did not leave mine. "I am Kalen too. It's a name they give the eldest son in my line, a proud name, a conqueror's name. My father died 6 years ago, choking on his own blood in a bed he did not deserve to die peacefully in. I took his name and his crown and his kingdom, and the first thing I did with them was send messengers into every valley to find any silver child who might have survived that night. I wanted to give it back, the hold, the lands, the crown, if there was anyone left to wear it." His voice cracked just slightly on the last of it. "They told me there was no one. They told me the line was ash. For 3 years I have refused to choose a Luna because it felt like sitting down for good in a house I stole." He looked at the knife. "And now the moon walks the last moonborn in the world into my auction hall wearing a stranger's face, and my wolf knows her before my eyes do, and I finally understand why I never wanted anyone else." The high garden was very quiet. The wind had died. Somewhere far below in the valleys a bell was ringing. "You're lying," I said, but I could hear, even as I said it, that I did not believe it. A wolf cannot lie with his whole body. I had lived my whole life reading the truth off of scent and stance and the set of a jaw, and everything about the man in front of me, the grief, the stillness, the throat he was baring to my blade, was true. All of it was true. "I'm not," he said, "and I think you know I'm not, or the knife would already be in me." He took a slow breath. "I won't stop you. If you need it to be me, if 15 years of hate need a throat and mine is the only one left with the right name, then do it. I mean that. I've carried my father's crime so long it's grown into me. I don't much mind if it kills me. But before you decide, I want you to know one thing." He held my gaze. "You are the rightful blood of this throne, not me. If you put that knife in my heart, you don't murder your enemy. You murder the one wolf in 7 valleys who spent his whole reign trying to give your kingdom back to you." I stood there with my grandmother's silver in my hand, and 15 years of certainty crumbled to dust between my fingers. I did not kill him. I lowered the knife. My arm was shaking so hard I nearly dropped it, and Kalen of Ironhollow, the son, not the father, the one who had spent 6 years looking for me without ever knowing my name, reached out very slowly and closed his hand around mine, over the hilt, warm and steady, and he did not take the blade from me. He just held my hand still. "There," he said softly, "there, breathe." And to my everlasting shame and everlasting relief, I did. We did not tell the court. Not at first. There was too much to understand, and understanding took time, and time in Ironhollow was a thing measured out under 1,000 watching eyes. I kept the glamour on in public. It seemed safest. A stray-born Luna the highborn merely resented. A moonborn heir returned from the dead would set every ambitious wolf in 7 valleys reaching for a knife of their own. So by day I wore the ash, and let Seraphine and her kind sneer at the plain little stray who had somehow snared the king. And by night, in the high garden or in the king's own study with the door barred, I took the glamour off in Caelan, and I learned each other by lamplight. I will not pretend it was smooth. There is no smooth way to fall for the son of the man who murdered your family, and I fought it the whole way down. There were nights I looked at his face and saw his father's crown and had to leave the room. There were nights he could not meet my eyes for the shame of what his blood had done. We circled each other like 2 wolves who cannot decide whether to fight or lie down. And more than once I packed my grandmother's knife back into my hem and stood at the top of the black stairs, ready to leave and never come back. But I never did leave. And slowly, the way frost leaves a garden, not all at once, but a little more each morning, the hatred I had polished so smooth began to wear away, and something else began to grow in the raw place underneath it. He showed me the archives. That was what turned it in the end. Deep in the keep, in a cold vault behind an iron door only the king could open, Caelan had kept everything, every record of his father's war, every name of every wolf who died in the burning of the Silver Hold, every failed attempt over 6 years to find a survivor. He had not hidden it. He had preserved it, the way you preserve a wound so that you never forget how you came by it. He had written, in his own hand, at the front of the largest ledger, "These deaths are the foundation this throne is built on. A king who forgets his foundation deserves to have it collapse beneath him." And there near the back in a list of the silver dead I found my own name, Irale, daughter of Corvin, presumed lost age 6, and beside it in fresher ink in his hand a single word, searching. I put my hand over that word, and I wept for the first time in 15 years. He did not touch me while I cried. He stood a little apart, the way you stand near a wounded thing you desperately want to help and know you must not crowd, and he let me have it. When I was done, when I had scrubbed my face and put myself back together, I looked at him across that cold vault full of the names of my dead, and I said the thing I had come 6 years too late to say to anyone. "I forgive you." "You can't," he said. "It wasn't yours to." "I forgive you," I said again, "for the crime you didn't commit, and for the name you didn't choose, and for the crown you never wanted, and for spending 6 years looking for a ghost when the ghost was hiding on purpose so she wouldn't be found." I stepped closer, "And I'm asking you to forgive me. Because I came up this mountain to kill you, and instead I'm going to have to marry you, and I don't see any way around it, because my wolf lifted her head the same moment yours did, and neither of them has put it back down since." He stared at me, Irale. "Don't argue with the moon," I said. "It's rude." And the king of Ironhollow, who had not smiled in 3 years, finally remembered how. We would have had our peace, I think, if the world had let us. But the world does not let the last of an old line simply come home. There were too many wolves in the 7 valleys who had grown fat on the burning of the silver pack. There were the lords whose grandfathers had joined the old Caelan's coalition and been rewarded with silver lands. There was Seraphine's father, the warden of the Red Valley, who had wanted his daughter on the throne and now watched a stray-born stranger sit where his blood should sit. And there was, at the center of it all, an old wolf named Vashon. Vashon had been the old Caelan's war master. It was Vashon, the record said, who had planned the night of the burning, who had chosen the moonless dark, who had cut the roads, who had made certain no silver wolf escaped. The old Kaelin led the coalition, but Vashan was its knife. And when the old Kaelin died, Vashan did not fade quietly into old age. He kept his lands, his warriors, his web of loyal lords across the valleys, and he watched the young king's every move with the patience of a spider who knows the fly will tire eventually. He had opposed the search for silver survivors. Of course he had. A living moonborn heir was the one thing in all the world that could undo his life's great work. And now, though he did not yet know her name, he could smell that something had changed on the mountain, that the king's chosen Luna was not what she appeared, that old blood magic hung about her, that the young king had gone strange and soft and secretive. Vashan was a hunter. He had spent 15 years believing his hunt was over. And hunters, when they scent old prey, do not sleep. The reveal, when it came, was not one I chose. I want that understood. I had meant to unveil myself in my own time, on my own terms, standing beside Kaelin with the whole court arranged and the guards in place and the moment prepared. That is the version of the story where I stay in control of my own face to the very end. That is not the version that happened. It happened at the mating rite. By the old law of Ironhollow, a king's chosen Luna must be presented to the assembled packs before the marriage bond can be sealed. It is a public thing, a fortress full of watching wolves, the 7 valleys sending up their lords to witness. Kaelin and I had agreed I would go through it in the glamour, one last night as the stray-born Luna, and reveal the truth only after the bond was sealed and the throne secured, when it would be far harder to challenge. We should have known Vashan would not wait for the safe moment. Hunters never do. The great hall was full. The same tiered hall as the auction, but transformed banners down the walls, torches by the hundred, the whole highborn of the kingdom in their furs and their jewels and their appetites. Kaelin stood at the black dais in the dark iron circlet of his office, and I stood beside him in the ash-gray glamour and a gown the color of moonflowers, and the crier lifted his voice to begin the rite. He never finished the first word. Vashan rose from the tiers, an old wolf, silver-furred even in his human skin, with a face like a cliff and eyes like 2 chips of winter. And he did not shout. That was the terrible part. He did not rage or accuse. He simply walked down onto the slate floor into the space before the dais, into the space where I had first crossed to meet the king, and he said, in a voice pitched to carry to every stone of that hall, "Before the bond is sealed, let the pack see the true face of the woman who would be their Luna, for she wears a stranger's face over her own. There is glamour on her, old glamour, blood glamour. I have hunted that scent before." His winter eyes found mine, and they were certain, and they were glad. I hunted it 15 years ago on a moonless night in the Silver Hold, and I never finished the hunt. The hall erupted. Kaelin moved to my side, and I felt the growl building in his chest, felt his wolf surging up ready to tear the old war master apart where he stood, but it was too late, and we both knew it. The word was out. Blood glamour, the scent of the Silver Hold. Half the lords in that hall were old enough to know exactly what it meant, and the other half could read it off the faces of the first. The whole room was turning toward me like a single beast, hungry and afraid. And the king's fury could kill Vashan, but it could not unring the bell. So I made a choice. I have made a great many choices in this story, and most of them were slow and polished and planned. This one I made in the space of a single heartbeat, and it was the only one I have never once regretted. I stepped forward, past Kaelin, out to the center of the slate floor where the whole kingdom could see me, and I opened my shutters all the way. I did not do it slowly this time. I did not do it gently. I threw them wide, the way you throw open the great doors of a hall to let in the storm, and I let the ash burn off my skin in an instant, and I let my mother's face and my grandmother's face, and the light the moon was said to have touched come blazing up out of the plain little stray like the sun clearing the shoulder of the mountain, and I rose up straight and terrible and lovely in the torchlight, the last moon-born in all the world. And I let them see. The great hall went utterly, completely silent. Not a wolf moved, not a wolf breathed, Every face in that vast room, highborn and low, lord and warrior and servant, Seraphine white as bone in the front tier, Vashon frozen in the center of the floor. Every single one of them turned toward me the way plants turn toward a window, because that is what the old light does, that is what it has always done, and none of them could help it any more than they could help their own hearts beating. I let the silence sit. I had learned that from watching Kaelin. You do not fill a silence you have earned. Then I spoke, and my voice was my mother's voice, the voice that could silence a war council, and it filled the hall to its lost and smoky ceiling. I am Irale, I said, daughter of Corvin, last of the Silver Pack, the Moonborn, the line this wolf. I did not point at Vashon. I did not need to. Every eye followed mine to him and pinned him where he stood. The line this wolf and his master burned to the root on a moonless night 15 years ago when I was 6 years old, and my mother hid me under a barrel of apples in a root cellar and told me to keep my shutters closed while she died so that I would live. I let that land. I watched it land, watched it move through the hall like a wave. I have kept them closed for 15 years. I am opening them now in the sight of the 7 valleys so that every wolf here understands exactly what has walked back into the light. The line you were promised was ash, the line you built your fat little valleys on top of. I smiled, and I made it my grandmother's smile, the one that stopped a duel. I am not ash, I am here, and I have come home. Vashon recovered faster than the rest. He was old and he was hard and he had hunted my family once already. He did not flinch. He did not kneel. He drew himself up in the center of the floor and his winter eyes burned, and he did the only thing a wolf like Vashon could do when the prey he thought long dead rose up in front of the whole kingdom. He reached for the truth like a weapon. A trick, he said, but I heard the crack in it, heard the certainty gone out of it. An impostor. Any wolf can be taught blood glamour. Any pretty stray can claim a dead line and... Then challenge it, Kaelin said. The king's voice cut across the hall like a blade drawn in the dark. He came down off the dais, slow and terrible, and he stood at my shoulder, not in front of me, I noticed, not shielding me, but beside me, the way you stand beside an equal, and he faced his father's old war master with 15 years of the wrong crown finally lifting off his shoulders. You've named her a liar before the 7 valleys, Vashon, he said. So challenge it the old way. The moon knows her own. If she's an impostor, the light will fail. If she's moonborn true, his pale gold eyes swept the hall. Then every wolf in this room already knows it because you can all feel it right now, can't you? The pull, under the ribs, the one none of you can lie about. He let that sit exactly the way I had taught him without meaning to. Kneel and be forgiven your doubt. Or stay standing and be judged for what you did on a moonless night when this hall was full of ash instead of witnesses. And that was the reckoning, not a blade, not blood on the slate, just a choice offered plainly to a hall full of wolves who had built their whole world on a burning they had been able to forget only so long as no one survived to remember it. Seraphine knelt first. I did not expect that. She was in the front tier, and she went down onto the slate in her red silk without a word, her proud face wet and open. And I understood not forgiveness, exactly, but recognition. She had wanted the crown her whole life, and she looked at me and finally saw what a Luna was supposed to be, and something in her that was better than her cruelty bent the knee to it. Then the Lord beside her, then the tier behind. It moved through the hall the way the turning toward had moved. One wolf, and then a dozen, and then 100. The whole highborn of Ironhillow sinking down onto the black stone floor before the last moonborn, until the only creature left standing in all that vast room was old Vashon, alone in the center of the slate, the hunter with no hunt left, the knife of a coalition whose crime had just walked back out of the grave to stand in the torchlight and be beautiful and be alive. He did not kneel. I will give him that. Whatever else he was not a coward. He stood alone in a sea of bowed backs, and he looked at me with his winter eyes, and I looked back at him. And for one long moment 15 years hung in the air between us, the barrel of apples and the root cellar and my mother's voice telling me to keep my shutters closed. I had my grandmother's knife. I still had it. It was in my hem, a handspan from my fingers, and no wolf in that hall would have lifted a hand to stop me. I could have finished my grandmother's instruction right there, ended the line that ended ours, put the silver in the one throat that truly deserved it, and every witness in the 7 valleys would have called it justice. I looked at Vashon, and I looked at Kalen beside me, the son who had spent 6 years searching for a ghost, who had written searching in fresh ink beside my name in a ledger of the dead. And I thought about what it would mean to become, in that moment, in front of the whole kingdom I had just come home to, exactly the thing that had made me, a wolf who answers a burning with a burning, who ends a line to avenge a line, who keeps the wheel turning through one more generation of ash. No, I said. It was the king's word from the auction. I gave it back to the hall changed. You planned my family's death, Vashon, I said. You chose the moonless dark. You cut the roads. You made certain a 6-year-old girl heard her mother die through the floor of a root cellar, and I have wanted your throat for 15 years the way a starving wolf wants meat. I let the whole hall hear how true that was. Then I let them hear the rest. But I did not survive that night to become you. My mother did not die hiding me so that I could grow up into the same knife that killed her. You will not have my hands. You do not get to make me into one more thing you burned. I looked down at him from the height the moon had given me. You will be stripped of your lands and your warriors and your name. You will live out your years in the cold cells under this keep in the dark, where you sent so many of mine. And every night in that dark, you will have to sit with the one thing you tried hardest to prevent. I smiled my grandmother's smile one last time. You will have to know that the silver pack lives, that the moonborn came home, that you failed. That is your sentence, War Master, not death, failure. Carry it as long as you carried the hunt. They took him then. He did not struggle. I think at the very end something in him almost looked relieved, a hunter finally, mercifully put down. He was an old wolf, and the 15 years had been long for him too, in their way, though he had spent them on the wrong side of the moon. And when the great iron doors had closed behind him, the hall was quiet again, and I stood in the torchlight with the King of Ironhollow at my shoulder and the whole kingdom on its knees before me. And I understood that the errand I had carried up the mountain, look, judge, leave, was finished at last, and finished nothing like I had planned. I had come to end a line. Instead, I had come home to begin one. We sealed the bond that same night, under the open sky of the high garden, with the bent old pine as our only witness, and the 7 valleys spread below us glittering with the fires of 100 packs who had finally, after 15 years, been given back their true Luna. I took the glamour off for good. I never wore it again. The ash-faced stray had done what she was made to do. She had let a king choose me for nothing, for no blood and no name and no crown, for the plain true thing underneath all of it. And there is no gift in all the world greater than being chosen that way, before you are worth anything at all in the eyes of the counting world. Every daughter in 7 valleys had come to that auction wanting the crown. Kalen had passed over all of them and reached for the one wolf who wanted nothing from him but to look at his face and decide if he deserved to live. That is the only kind of choosing that means anything. I have thought about it a great deal, and I am certain of it now. He asked me once, much later, on a night when the frost was leaving the garden a little more each morning, whether I ever thought about the knife, whether some part of me still wished I had finished my grandmother's instruction on that first morning at the parapet, when his back was turned, and the whole thing would have been so simple. I thought about it honestly, because he had earned an honest answer, and because I had promised myself in that root cellar 15 years ago that if I ever got out from under the apples, I would never again be a wolf who lied. No, I told him. My grandmother put that knife in my hand and told me to end the line that ended ours, and I did. He looked at me, not understanding. The line that ended ours wasn't yours, Kalen. It was never really about a name or a throne. The line that ended mine was the wheel, the burning that answers a burning, the knife that makes another knife, the moonless night that has to happen again and again because someone always survives to want revenge. I put my hand over his, the way he had put his over mine on the first morning, closing my fingers around a hilt that was no longer there. I ended that, in front of the whole kingdom. I had the throat and the right and the witnesses, and I put the knife down instead. That's the line I killed, and it's the only one that ever needed killing. He was quiet for a long time after that. Then he drew me in against him, and we stood together at the parapet in the thin, cold light, the son of the wolf who burned my world and the last daughter of the world he burned. And below us, the 7 valleys turned slowly under the eye of the moon, who had walked me into that auction hall wearing a stranger's face for reasons I will never fully understand, and who had, in her terrible laughing wisdom, been right. They still tell the story in the 7 valleys. They tell it wrong mostly. They make it about the auction, about the Alpha King who chose the ugly little stray and shocked the court, about the moment the ash burned off and the last moonborn rose up in the torchlight and every proud wolf in the hall went down on its knees. That is the part they love, the reveal, the face under the face. But that was never the real turn of it, and I will tell you the true one, since you have listened this long. The real turn was not the moment I let them see who I was. The real turn was the moment I decided who I would not be. I kept my shutters closed for 15 years so that I would live. I opened them at the last so that I could come home. But the thing my mother truly hid under those winter apples, the thing worth more than the light or the line or the crown, was a girl who could hold a knife against the throat of everything she hated, and choose, in front of the whole watching world, to be something better than the hand that made her. That is the story, that is the whole of it. They can keep the auction if they like. I will keep the rest.